Casca is, without a doubt, one of the most tragic stories present in Berserk's narrative. She's a victim who never really gets much of a chance to shine outside of the Golden Age arc. For a long period of the manga, she is out of commission, and even when that changes, she's once again victimized at the hand of the very same person who made her believe that she had control over her own life to begin with. The same man that destroyed her psyche and changed her for the worse. While there certainly are stronger female leads in Berserk, Casca will probably stay my favorite for a really long time. She's tough, sometimes a bit overzealous, but she's also a kind and compassionate person that will do anything for the people she cares about. Whether that's Griffith, Guts, Judo, she's a headstrong woman with insane strength and determination, not to mention she is adorable. But the most tragic element of Casca's character is that she desperately wants to be loved. When we first meet Casca, it's around the point where Corcus and a few other members of the Band of the Hawk try to rob Guts after he defeats Bezuso. She knows that this action is illogical and stupid. Corcus is a greedy bastard, and he's wasting his time bothering a man who just killed Bezuso, who clearly held a big name considering his exploits. But despite her disapproval of Corcus's actions, Griffith still tells her to go deal with it. From the get-go, this exemplifies Griffith's trust of Casca as his strongest asset, but also his disregard for her own boundaries. I think one of the things I appreciate most about Berserk's writing is that Casca, being a woman, is intrinsically part of her character. When Guts first fights her, he's actually shocked that she's a woman, because this time period was never really that graceful to women. It was super rare to see a woman that good at fighting in the battlefield, which serves as one of the greatest hurdles for Casca to overcome. She gets easily overpowered by Guts, even despite how taken aback he is by her being a woman. But even after Griffith defeats him with ease, she still blames Corcus for the situation blowing up the way that it did. Afterwards, of course, Casca is made to comfort Guts, and use her body warmth to keep him from getting too cold. One of the first things we even learn about Griffith and his dynamic with Casca is that he doesn't see her as anything more than a tool for his own personal goals. He literally tells her that it's a woman's job to bring comfort to a man when he's cold. Already off the bat, we understand that Griffith sees her as nothing more than an object, and also seems to hold a lot of misogynistic views. Despite relying on her strength, he still treats her like a tool, and has her do something she doesn't want to do. This creates a disconnect between her and Guts. It is humiliating enough as is that she's forced to do something so shameful, but on top of that, Griffith seems fascinated by Guts. For once, he actually wants somebody on his team. She has spent a long time feeling as if she needs to fight for Griffith's attention, but for some reason, he's enamored by Guts. The controlled chaos that oozes from his fighting style, the way he doesn't play by the rules but still keeps his composure even in the face of death. It's so unlike anything a reserved, brilliant, pragmatic tactician like Griffith has ever seen. So because of this, Casca feels envious towards Guts. To her, he is just a brain-dead meathead, swinging his sword with no thought behind its purpose. There's no way he understands what Griffith is trying to build, or what makes Griffith such a special leader. Yet even despite this disdain for Guts, she still values Griffith's word above all else. Shortly after Griffith beats Guts in a duel, in an attempt to get him to join the Band of the Hawk, Casca steps in to save Guts when Corcus tries to sneak into his tent to kill him, but she makes it clear that she didn't do it for him. It's entirely for Griffith. The beautiful irony of Casca and Guts' dynamic early on is that Griffith was the one who technically brought them together, and by the end is the one who tears them apart. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For right now, it's clear that Casca is headstrong because she has a lot to prove. She is Griffith's strongest soldier, and craves his validation, but more than that, desires nothing more than to be his weapon, and help him reach that goal no matter the cost. The sad reality about Casca is that, as a woman, she has to work twice as hard as the men around her for only half the respect. When she sees Guts, she thinks of him as a wild dog. He is a lone wolf, swinging his sword with no purpose and no passion. He is aimless, unlike Griffith, who soars higher and higher with his ambition. She totally misunderstands Guts, but what she doesn't realize is that he's actually quite similar to her in a lot of ways. He's a much more compassionate man than she realizes. That's why he gets so angry when she accuses him of being insincere, because he does care for his men. He just has a unique way of showing it. It's why he so passionately threw himself into Death's Way, taking on Zod the Immortal to save his men, and refusing to back down even though everyone told him it was a bad idea. But to Casca, it only showed that he was a brash and impulsive liability, because Griffith put himself in danger's way for Guts and nearly got himself killed. To Casca, that is unforgivable. Guts is the only one who treats Griffith like an equal. Everyone else sees him as a god. When Griffith is busy talking to politicians and nobles, Guts is the only one who tries to force his way in so he can talk to his friend. She sees this as disrespectful, insulting in a way. The rest of them knew that Griffith was busy. He's making connections. He's establishing himself as an ally to the king, but Guts does not care about authority. He wants to see his friend, and is willing to push these guards aside without thinking of the consequences. So she punches him. His disrespect for protocol, his disregard for the rules, and his casual way of talking to Griffith. Why does Griffith value him so highly? Why does he only ever treat her like his weapon? Sure, she had resigned herself to be his weapon, but this imbalance feels unfair. Little by little, Griffith becomes unapproachable. Time and time again, she's hit with the realization that she is not meant to be with Griffith. The princess is the one he has his eye on. But even despite that, she still values him highly, desperate for his approval. She is constantly chasing a love that she will never receive, and watching as all of his respect goes to a man that she does not understand. But things start to change as Berserk runs its course. At another event, Guts is missing once again, probably off swinging his sword like he always is. But when he finally arrives, he looks a little rough around the edges. He's visibly traumatized, covered in sewer water and bleeding from an arrow wound. She catches him at an awkward moment of vulnerability, and right now, the only thing he cares about is seeing Griffith. I think what I appreciate about this is that Casca doesn't know what happened at all, but she can visibly put the pieces together that Guts just experienced something deeply unpleasant. So for once, she's not being her usual aggressive self. Even despite her disdain for Guts, she treats his wound by wrapping torn cloth around it, and urges him to wait until the princess is gone before he starts talking to Griffith. It's a moment of understanding and empathetic support. It's the first time she really starts to even slightly understand Guts, but it's also the first domino in the series of events leading up to the eclipse. As Griffith makes the declaration that he only sees someone as a friend if they are his equal, a comment that hurts Guts deeply, because up until now, Griffith was the closest thing to a friend that Guts had ever had. This also ends up being the catalyst for Casca and Guts' relationship to blossom, as right after this, they have another battle with Adon, a sleazy and misogynistic coward whom they've already defeated multiple times before. While on the battlefield, Casca's period starts, and it affects her significantly. She's become much weaker, fading in and out of consciousness. She is too physically ill, and her period is way too intense for her to fight. But she chooses to anyway, because men don't get periods. Soldiers don't get periods. She pushes herself beyond her limits because it's all she has ever known. She overcompensates, and in turn, puts her own life at risk just so she can be treated as an equal, and still faces constant misogyny and dehumanization despite all of the effort she puts into bettering herself as a warrior. And then to top it all off, it is none other than Guts that saves her from falling to her death off a cliffside. At this moment, we begin to understand that Guts is different from the other men in the show. He doesn't treat Casca any differently from anybody else just because she's a woman. He views her as yet another member of the Band of the Hawk, despite their differences. But what's even more shocking is how empathetic he is to her in this moment. When examining, he notices blood, and he starts to put two and two together pretty damn quickly. During this time period, I'm certain most men probably didn't even know what a period was, but Guts figures it out really fast and decides to hold her close for warmth. Almost like a way of paying her back for comforting him when he was hurt by Griffith. The two of them rest in a large, hollow cave, while Guts watches the rain with an expression of clarity. Casca wakes up with immense shame, and she starts acting brash and impulsive. She attacks Guts, even throwing a knife towards his head, because up until now, she has envied him, and now that he's saved her, she can't help but be humiliated. I think the best part about this scene is that while Guts is supportive, he's also still clearly very ignorant. He even admits that himself.
You have no endurance. You anger too easily. And you've got woman troubles.
You know nothing about women.
Of course not. I'm a man. How would I know?
These comments could be read as misogynistic, but I truly think that Guts has nothing but respect for Casca. His words are harsh, but they're purely for motivation's sake. He knows how dangerous this world can be for women, and that's partly because, well, not even Guts was safe from harmful, violent men. This entire section of the Golden Age arc is easily the peak. It gives a lot of clarity, not only for Guts and Casca, but for Griffith too. She opens up to Guts about her past, how she was sold away to a rich noble who had bad intentions. It's only in this moment that Guts finally understands her. He sees how hard it's been for her, and even begins to realize that she's a lot more similar to him than either of them initially realized. He's a victim to Donovan, and unlike Casca, he wasn't saved by Griffith. Nobody was there to save him. He was violated and forced to fend for himself. That's why he doesn't trust people. It's why he kicked and screamed when Pippin picked him up, why he felt uncomfortable when Casca laid with him, why he snapped at that merchant who tried to make a deal with him and put their hand on his shoulder. Guts relates to Casca's pain because he knows what it's like to be taken advantage of by someone more powerful than him. It's also why he valued Griffith so much, because Griffith gave him the approval that he never got from his abusive father figure. When Griffith saved Casca, he didn't do it out of heroics. He simply gave her a sword and allowed her the opportunity to save herself. He's the reason she decided to become a warrior, because at this point in her life, she had nothing. Her family abandoned her so they could have less mouths to feed. The way Griffith enters her life almost feels reminiscent of a hero in a fairy tale, but it's interesting that while he did have a bias and a certain disdain for the rich noble taking advantage of the commoner, he still didn't interfere. He simply threw down a sword and watched to see who would pick it up first, almost like performing an experiment. It feels like a subtle indication that morality for Griffith is questionable. He's a selfish man that operates entirely by logic, and it's ironic that he was the one to save Casca from being raped, and also the one who destroyed her for good. From there, she opens up about how Griffith was once crushed at the sight of a young dead boy, how he was so affected by it, he prostituted himself to Genin for funds, because he would rather be objectified and taken advantage of as a minor than to let another innocent peasant boy be murdered. I find it fascinating that this moment between Casca and Griffith paints him in such a sympathetic light, despite how suspiciously underhanded his methods have been up until now. From Casca's perspective, he is an empathetic and troubled man. It crushes her to see him draw blood from his arms, or to witness what he did with Genin. But we as viewers know that Griffith has a darker side bubbling beneath the surface, one that she doesn't seem to notice initially. When Guts talks to Casca, more specifically when he tries to motivate her, he does so in a way that feels affectionately harsh, almost like he's telling her what he wishes someone had told him. And I think that's part of what makes their dynamic so fun. It's enemies to lovers in the best possible way. This, of course, leads us to the moment that Adon and his forces find them once again. One of my favorite lines that actually didn't make it to the anime is this part where Guts tells Adon straight up that he wouldn't want to mess with her because she would bite his dick right off. It's a goofy moment, but it also emphasizes that Guts is one of the few people that actually sees her. He sees Casca's strength, which so many other men take for granted. At this moment, the two of them are surrounded and both are kicking ass as equals. At a certain point, Samson comes along, a big, beefy man with a massive ball and chain. Since Casca is more of a rush-down, lightweight fighter that moves quickly, and Guts is more of a tank, he quickly takes the defensive and starts blocking his blows. In the process, this ends up killing many of Adon's other men, emphasizing his brash stupidity and inability to pay attention. Adon is a man that never thinks things through. He only sees them at face value. It's why he thinks Casca is weak, because he first met her when she was sickly and under the weather. But what's more interesting is Guts' decision to block rather than dodge. Adon just assumes that he's doing this because he doesn't think he'd be fast enough to evade, but Casca knows that is not the reason. He's doing this for her. Something that no one has ever done for her. While she may not realize it, this is the first moment where Casca starts to become attached to Guts. For so long, she has fought for love and respect and never gotten it. Then suddenly, the man she despises most puts his life on the line for her, giving her the respect and compassion that she never once got from Griffith. Guts pushes himself to an unbelievable standard and comes out on top. There's something really powerful about how emotionally distraught Casca is when she finds Guts unconscious, mistakenly believing him to be dead. Because of what Guts did for her, she begins to care for him greatly. This is what leads to the brilliant moment afterwards, one of the most impactful and important elements in the entirety of Berserk. After the big battle in which Guts becomes known as the 100-Man Slayer, Judo approaches Casca with his usual compassionate wingman attitude. He tells her that Griffith actually fought for her and Guts, and refused to back down until he found them. This shocks Casca. and Judo even admits that it made him a little bit jealous. I think in many ways this re-emphasizes why Casca cares for Griffith so deeply, as well as why they all respect him. Yes, he becomes a much more petty and heinous person later on when the power starts getting to his head, but it makes sense that he would get defensive when told to forget about his two most valuable assets. Even though he never shows her much love, Griffith does at least seem to hold her in high esteem, at least enough that he's willing to put his life on the line to save her. This is also where Judo gives her some ointment he got from a pretty familiar face. Of course, who else would Casca use this on than Guts? He sustained the most injuries and pushed himself way beyond his limits, as well as beyond the limits of any normal man. Where else would she find him after such an accomplishment than atop a hill overlooking the Band of the Hawk? Guts has always been one to isolate himself, but this time it's a bit different. He just learned that Griffith doesn't see him as a friend, even after putting his life on the line to fulfill his wish. Then he put his life on the line again to save a woman who had hated him up until this point. This event formed a bond between them. Even though he says outright that he only ever did it because giving up just isn't in his nature, she doesn't fully buy that it was exclusively for himself. It's true that Guts has always been brash and impulsive when fighting, gambling with his life over and over again, but this time was different. In this moment, he talks about the various campfires below, how everyone has a different dream and they all culminate in one big flame, that being Griffith's dream.
Like a bonfire of dreams.
Well, that was beautiful. You sounded like the princess talking.
Don't say that!
I think what I appreciate about this scene is that from Guts' perspective, it's drawn to be rather silly. He teases her a bit, but thinks little of it. For Casca, however, this praise he gives her means everything, even if she doesn't realize it yet. The way she idolizes Griffith, places him up on this pedestal, and cherishes every moment with him just simply isn't the foundation for a healthy relationship. She is heavily infatuated with him, but he's always just out of reach, looking beyond her. With Guts, however, the two of them are comfortable around each other. They understand each other, and are able to lift each other up in moments of weakness. That compatibility is difficult to write, but Miura handles this relationship so intimately and so elegantly that it's hard not to get attached. Yet the sad reality of the scene is that this is also the moment where Casca finds out that Guts will be leaving soon. This transitions into the final battle with Adon and Genin. This is a big moment for everyone, with Guts facing a powerful enemy and even being saved by Zod as a thank you for the big beautiful fight he gave him before, or even with Griffith finally killing a man that took advantage of him when he was a minor. But to me, the best moment is the second round between Casca and Adon. Up until now, Adon has been a bit unbearable. He's extremely brash, very misogynistic, and at certain points is very creepy towards Casca. He revels in how badly he wants to make her a sex slave for him and his men to take advantage of if and when they please. But since she was on her period during their first encounter, he grossly underestimates her this time around, baffled by her strength. In the end, she subdues him easily and cuts off the top of his head. I think Casca's words put his character into perspective quite nicely. He's a pathetic man with a massive ego, but quite entertaining to say the least. I absolutely love that it was her who killed him, and not Guts or Griffith, as it's easily the most fitting way to conclude his character arc. He spent his whole life underestimating and belittling women, and in the end, he lost to one. This also happens to be the battle that finally brings the Band of the Hawk the success they've only ever dreamed of until now. They've won the favor of the king, and can only ascend higher and higher from here. Guts even helps Griffith take care of the people that wish to see him assassinated, tying up every loose end in a neat little bow. One of the most adorable and lovable scenes in the series is the one where they're at the party, and Casca feels deeply uncomfortable. She's being harassed by several men at the event, and tries to get away from them, but she doesn't go to Griffith for comfort, instead going right to Guts. They're both a bit socially awkward, and she really doesn't like this dress she's been made to wear, always feeling like men's clothing is more comfortable. It's clear that the two of them have a shared bond, and that she trusts Guts a lot more than the others, which is why it's so sad that Guts had to leave. Casca is the first person to try and stop him, and when he doesn't listen, she goes and gets Griffith. In this moment, she finds herself hoping that Griffith can beat him, but she almost questions it. Why does she care so much? Beforehand, she didn't care at all about Guts. In fact, she hoped he would end up dead somewhere, but now she doesn't want him to leave. She wants him to stay. Things are better than ever right now for both the Band of the Hawk and the trajectory of Griffith's dream, and now she has this uneasy feeling that if Guts leaves, things won't be the same anymore. With how strong Griffith is, surely he can stop Guts from leaving the Band of the Hawk. That's what she finds herself hoping for, at least. But in a shocking twist of events, Guts defeats Griffith. Not only that, he barely even has to try. He breaks his sword in one swing and then departs, likening himself to a pebble that they picked up on the road and set to the side. But this outcome was always going to happen. Guts was just a teenager when Griffith first challenged him, but little by little we've watched him improve. He's become the strongest member of the Band of the Hawk, while Griffith's skill in battle hasn't improved much at all. Griffith is someone who is used to being on top, and Guts is the first person to refuse him. He's the first man to forge his own path and leave him behind. This destroys Griffith. The idea that he can't have Guts, but also the idea that he might not be as strong as he thinks he is. He was defeated and humiliated in front of his men. In a moment of vulnerability, Griffith ends up sneaking into Charlotte's chambers and having sex with her. From victim to perpetrator, Griffith takes advantage of the princess while she's underage in order to further achieve his dream, and ends up being caught. It was a brash and impulsive moment of weakness to make himself feel powerful, because losing Guts meant he lost the most valuable part of his army. But in the end, he gets caught and arrested, and tortured for an entire year. There's a very good video breaking down just how horrendously cruel Griffith's torture was. I won't go into detail, but some of it involved having his tongue cut out, hot needles stabbed into his skin, and left in the cold, dark dungeon to rot for long and arduous periods of time. It turns out the king was never an idol, he was never honorable, he was just a creep with a gross obsession over his own daughter, and that's why he feels the need to torture Griffith to such an extent. This leaves Casca with the worst possible situation. The Band of the Hawk are now outlaws. The success and victory they just achieved goes away almost overnight. Their leader, Griffith, is gone, and they don't even know if he's dead or alive. Thus, Casca, being the strongest member, ends up taking matters into her own hands. Now, she is the leader of the Band of the Hawk, and for a solid year does her best to help the group recuperate. She ends up losing sleep, tirelessly and endlessly fighting to make it through each and every day the best she can. Just like Guts, she is a survivor. She's very headstrong and can make the most out of a tough situation, but also like Guts, she has a breaking point. Why did Guts abandon her? Why couldn't he stay? Why would Griffith fall apart like this? That was never the kind of man Griffith was. Then to make matters worse, Guts saves them while they're being attacked by Kushan forces. Gone for an entire year. Then he just comes out of nowhere, acting like nothing even happened. This infuriates Casca, so much so that she talks to him in private just so she can attack him. Casca has to keep her head on for an entire year, making difficult decisions and carrying the weight of Griffith's legacy. We already established that as a woman she has to work twice as hard for half the respect, but now she's taking up the role of filling in for fucking Griffith of all people. An impossible task, but one she has to accept anyway. It puts a lot of strain on Casca, and when she sees Guts, all of that composure is completely destroyed. She isn't thinking rationally anymore, just angry that he would leave, but she also recognizes that it wasn't his fault. He wasn't obligated to stay. It was Griffith's choice to sleep with the princess. It was Griffith's own actions that got him arrested. This moment is heavy because Casca doesn't know what to do. She wasn't meant to be a leader. The only thing she ever wanted was to be seen, to be cherished, to be loved. She thought she had that with Griffith, but now he's gone. Then she thought she had that with Guts, but he abandoned her. So at this moment, all she can think about is ending her own life. She's tired. She can't fight anymore. She just wants the pain to end, so she falls down a cliff once again, only for Guts to be the one to save her again. And I think it's pretty clear that Casca hates herself. She feels immense shame for having attacked Guts, making him bleed once again. She hates the way he always gets himself hurt for her sake. She's become so lonely and exhausted that she feels like she's gonna break. And it's only in this exact moment that she finally realizes she loves Guts. This scene is very intimate and detailed. I mean, it literally goes on for several chapters. And it's important because this is the first time that Guts has ever consented to anyone. Up until now, he wouldn't even let his friends touch him, let alone strangers. He is deeply affected by what Donovan did to him as a child, and he never talks about it to anybody. So of course, his trauma kicks in when they have sex. He ends up choking her, and when he snaps back to reality, immediately feels immense regret. He feels like he ruined her first time. This is interesting to me because male victims don't get a lot of attention in stories like this. Men have a lot of confused and toxic ideas of what sex is, but the truth is, even a man like Guts has moments where he's vulnerable. Sex can be scary. You're opening up to somebody. They're seeing parts of you that nobody has ever seen before. But Casca isn't affected by it. In fact, she's very supportive. She was also a victim, and while she ended up saving herself, she knows how it feels to have her agency taken away from her. This scene is just beautiful to such a depressing degree. Their compatibility is just insanely well written. Yeah, it's a sex scene, and I usually hate sex scenes, but here it feels really pure. This is true and genuine love, and you can tell that they care a lot about each other. It makes it clear that both of them have a lot of baggage. Both of them are deeply flawed. But they see each other and appreciate each other, warts and all. But Guts still tells her that he has no intention of returning to the Band of the Hawk, which frustrates her greatly. Here, she finally found the love and acceptance that she craved for so long, but he won't even stick around, not for her. And yet, Guts still shocks her. He tells her that she can come with him. They can chase a life together. While Guts has spent the last year honing his skill, he hasn't found a dream. But he knows one thing for certain. He wants a life with her. He wants to be with her. And in many, many ways, feels regretful that he didn't realize that sooner. So the two of them depart, ready to break Griffith out of his confinement and try to reform the Band of the Hawk. It just melts my heart to see how supportive they are of each other. Guts specifically tells her that she should stay behind, and she tells him that he has no intention of leaving Guts to do this alone. She will be there to lift him up, and he'll do the same for her. It's genuinely sweet, and it's clear that these characters have found happiness. But that tone does not last very long. When they find Griffith, they discover that he is completely destroyed beyond repair. The damage that was done to him was so brutal, and had gone on for so long, that Griffith is a husk of his former self. In this moment, they bring him back from Midland, and now realize that he cannot survive by himself. His tendons were cut. He cannot speak. He can't even shit or eat by himself. I think what's kind of sad about this is that neither Casca nor Guts really understand what Griffith is feeling. When he sees Casca and Guts together, it infuriates him. Casca loved him, and while he never returned the feeling, now realizing that neither of them need him anymore and confide in each other makes him feel angry. He was the one who brought them together, and now he feels as if both of them have replaced him. He tries to choke Guts, but has lost all of his strength, and Guts doesn't even understand what he's doing. He tries to rape Casca, but again is too weak to do it, and like Guts, she has no clue what his intentions truly are. They see Griffith as a good man. They remember him as an honorable man who had put himself in harm's way for his soldiers, but this is no longer the Griffith they knew. Living in his own paranoia, losing track of time and suffering through each day, knowing he doesn't have a future ahead of him. This one mistake has led to Griffith effectively losing his mind. The dark parts of his personality, which were always there from the beginning, have now amplified, and all he has left is his hatred for Guts' betrayal, and now his newfound disdain for Casca. When she sees him in this state, and truly comprehends just how badly he's been torn apart, she realizes that she can't go with Guts. She can't be a part of his dream, and refuses to let him stay on her account. She doesn't want to hold him back from finding himself. She has to stay with Griffith. He was the one who saved her life, so now she feels like she owes it to him. Yet when Griffith hears this, he imagines a scenario where he's gotten better, where Casca takes care of him and he's forced to live a mundane, boring life with this woman. No agency, no kingdom, just Casca feeding him his meals every day and helping him do basic tasks that he can't do himself. Griffith can't take this, and is so distraught at how much his life has been destroyed, how much has been taken from him, that he tries to kill himself. And yet he can't even do that right. The moment where Griffith tries to force out choked, pained laughter as he realizes just how much his life has fallen apart is painful, and yet in that moment of desperation, the Bailet returns to him. It was taken away and thrown into the sewers a year ago, and now it mysteriously comes right back to him in this lake. The same Bailet that saved his life countless times. He is then given the chance to change things. The God Hand want to accept him as one of their own. He can regain his body. He can go back to chasing his dream, and all he needs to do is sacrifice the Band of the Hawk. It makes sense that he would make this decision, though there is a part of him that hesitates. Yet at the end of the day, his dream is more important than any of them, even Guts. He realizes that Guts was the only person to ever make him forget that, and chooses to sacrifice all of them. This is already a sadistic and cruel action, but it's one that makes sense. Griffith had endured pain and torment for an entire year and had lost his mind. If given the chance, he would choose to restore his body and chase his dream because he's always been that way. Only now the motivations are even stronger because of the hell he had to live through. Yet Guts and Casca don't understand this. They are left to watch as their comrades are brutally murdered by these otherworldly demons, and the harshest death in the entire lineup is that of Judo's. Here he is risking his neck to keep Casca alive, stating that she must live on as the commander of the Band of the Hawk, but as he slowly starts to bleed to death, he asks her something unsettling. He asks if she cries a lot when she's alone. We know that Judo loved Casca, but he never pursued her because he only ever wanted her to be happy. He sees her crying for him and feels touched, but doesn't have enough time or strength to tell her how much it means to him, or to tell her how he really feels. So he leaves her with this cryptic question about how much she cries when she's alone. She puts up a facade, a mask to hide the pain she deals with. She doesn't let anyone see her tears, but sometimes she just can't help herself. Judo sees that, and tries to tell her, but ends up dying before he can. From Casca's perspective, it was almost like he was mocking her. In the end, he dies while clinging to her hand, and before Casca can even process it, she's attacked by several of the monsters. That is, until Griffith is reborn. Guts has been fighting these apostles to the best of his ability, one of the only ones still left alive, so Griffith does something unspeakably horrific. He violates Casca, while the demons hold Guts down and force him to watch. In this moment, Casca has officially hit a phase of derealization. She feels like she stumbled into some sort of nightmare, and all of her loved ones have been brutally murdered and eaten in front of her. She just lost Judo, one of the people she cares about most, so when Griffith violates her, she has no idea what to make of the situation. Part of it is shame. It's also a confusing moment for her. She loved Griffith for a really long time, and now he's forcing himself on her. At various points throughout the Golden Age arc, the Skull Knight has shown up to tell Guts that this was inevitably going to happen. So naturally, he ends up being the one to save them both, and breaks them out of there after Griffith has already finished the deed. It is a vile scene. It's cruel, horrifying, and heart-wrenchingly brutal. It makes you hate Griffith with every fiber of your being, and finally understand why Guts has turned into the cynical, hateful bastard he became in the Black Swordsman arc. But we didn't know about Casca. She and Guts are saved, and taken back to a cave where Gato, Erica, and Rickert? What are you doing here? Are all waiting for them. And after treating their wounds, Guts comes to a horrifying realization. Casca's mental psyche has been completely destroyed. She has no memory of who she was, with her mental state reduced to that of an infant. She can no longer speak or understand what is going on around her. What happened to her was so awful, so difficult to bear, she literally couldn't. I think one thing people misunderstand is that Mira did not revel in Casca's pain. What happened was unprecedented and extremely harsh, but I think the fact that he goes into detail about how badly it affects her mentally shows that she is an important piece of the puzzle. Like usual, Casca's agency was taken away from her, and now any semblance of happiness she had left after Griffith disappeared is completely and utterly gone. She's a woman who had her life taken from her over and over again. Some people think that Casca's character is unfairly cruel, and I do agree with that sentiment somewhat, as I think having her slowly develop into a new person over the course of the manga would have been a better choice, but as it stands, she's still a tragic and fantastically written character. She was dealt a shit hand and always had to push herself to ridiculous heights so she could prove herself, and that stays true even now in the newest chapters of Berserk. I am hoping that Casca can find her own agency, but this story is still ongoing even to this day. Yet one thing remains true of Casca. She is a victim who only ever wanted acceptance and love. Then when she finally got that love, it was torn away from her and shattered into a million pieces.